So how does a protest song become a weapon? And what if I told you that a curse, written way back in 1963, could actually help us understand our political battles today? We're about to break down one of the most blistering pieces of writing of the 20th century, Bob Dylan's Masters of War, to really understand the anatomy of a curse. So yeah, 1963. A young Bob Dylan writes these words. And with this opening salvo, you can tell he wasn't just protesting. No, this was something else. This was a direct indictment. He was literally casting a curse, using language not just to persuade, but to condemn. So, to really get its power, we have to look at this thing not just as a piece of music, but as a kind of rhetorical weapon. Let's dig in and dissect the anatomy of the curse itself. Now, what's really fascinating here is the form Dylan is using. It's essentially what you'd call a curse poem. And this isn't just some general complaint about war, it's a ritual. The whole point is to publicly name a target and then, just through the power of words, completely strip them of their legitimacy. The engine that drives this entire curse, the source of its relentless, brutal power, is one single word: you. He uses it over and over and over again. You see, this isn't a song about them or some abstract system. It's a finger pointed directly at a person, and it makes the accusation absolutely inescapable. And this just illustrates the speaker's claim to power so brilliantly. The power isn't political and it's not physical. It's moral vision. The speaker is saying, look, you can hide behind your wealth, you can hide behind your bureaucracy, but I see you. I see who you really are. And that act of seeing is the very first step in dismantling the master's authority. Okay, so who exactly is being cursed here? Dylan isn't just accusing a single person, he's accusing a very specific kind of power, that hidden hand, the one that operates from a safe, comfortable distance. When you look at the indictment list in the song, a really clear pattern emerges. The master, well, they never get their hands dirty. They build, they play, they hide. They fasten the triggers for other people to pull, and then they just sit back and watch. The song frames this not just as evil, but as profound, deep cowardice. This verse is really the heart of the whole thing. It's about a kind of power that profits from conflict, but flees from its human cost. The master creates the violence, hands the tools to someone else, and then just disappears the moment the consequences arrive. And this right here, this is the central moral problem that Dylan is attacking. The song argues that maybe the greatest evil isn't even the act of war itself, but the act of wielding all that destructive power from a place of perfect safety with absolutely zero accountability. Now, that was 1963, but the mechanics of accusation and blame, well, they're timeless. So let's pivot and see how this curse echoes when we look at it through a more modern lens. I mean, how does this dynamic of power, distance, and accusation actually play out today? In a world where the battlefield is often social media and the weapons are narratives. To explore this, we're going to use the rhetoric of Donald Trump as a kind of case study. And to be perfectly clear, the goal here isn't political endorsement or critique. This is a purely rhetorical analysis, just to see how these strategies of assigning blame and performing authority have evolved. And for this analysis, we need to broaden our definition of war a little bit. We're not just talking about military conflict anymore. We're talking about the cultural and media battles for narrative control, where outrage and division have become the primary weapons. So when you put them side by side, this comparison shows a fundamental inversion. Dylan's master is hidden, anonymous, operating through indirect control. But in contrast, this modern authority is completely public. It's performed for an audience. The enemy isn't some shadowy complex, it's a publicly named opponent. The very nature of the master has been turned completely inside out. So, this brings us to the final and maybe most crucial piece of the puzzle. If the nature of the master has changed so dramatically, then what about the audience? Who are these different forms of rhetoric actually speaking to? Dylan's curse poem, it imagines its audience as a jury of witnesses. The listener is sort of passive, and they're being awakened. The song's goal is to give them that moral sight we talked about, to let them see a hidden injustice, and by seeing it, to demand accountability from those in the shadows. In stark contrast, this more modern form of rhetoric imagines an audience of active participants. They aren't just being asked to see an injustice. They're being invited to join a team, to actively participate in the public accusation and condemnation of a clearly identified enemy. And here's what happens when these two audiences collide out in the public square. You have one worldview that's constantly searching for hidden puppet masters behind the curtain, and another worldview that's aiming all its outrage at very public, named targets. Both sides feel like they are fighting a righteous war against a master, but their definitions of that master are fundamentally totally incompatible. All of this leaves us with a final, big question. From Dylan's curse to today's media wars, when language itself is a weapon, who is truly responsible? Is it the speaker who aims the words, or is it the audience that chooses to carry them into battle?